The letter arrived 3 weeks after Billy Thompson was already dead. But what his mother read inside would change everything she thought she knew about her son's final days at Gallipoli. It was December 15th, 1915, when Mrs. Eleanor Thompson heard the familiar creak of the front gate at her small farmhouse outside Melbourne. The postman's heavy footsteps on the wooden porch had become a sound she both longed for and dreaded. For 8 months, those letters from her Billy had been her lifeline, her only connection to her youngest son fighting on the other side of the world. But this letter felt different the moment she touched it. The envelope was stained, weathered, and bore markings she'd never seen before. Her hands trembled as she noticed the date, November 28th, 1915. 3 weeks after the telegram had arrived, 3 weeks after she'd learned that Private William Thompson, service number 2847, had been killed in action at Lone Pine. What she was about to discover would shatter everything she thought she knew about her son's final days. But before we reveal what that letter contained, you need to understand who Billy Thompson really was, and why this particular letter would change not just his mother's life, but the lives of everyone who knew him. Billy had enlisted on April 25th, 1915, the very day the first ANZAC troops landed at Gallipoli. He was just 22 years old, a farm worker with calloused hands and dreams bigger than the small Victorian town where he'd grown up. His best mate, Charlie Morrison, had signed up the same day, and together they'd promised their families they'd look after each other. "We'll be home by Christmas, Mum," Billy had written in his very first letter from the training camp. "Charlie and I are going to see the world, serve our country, and come back with stories that'll last a lifetime." How could any of them have known that Christmas would come and go and Billy would never see home again? The early letters had been full of optimism and adventure. Billy wrote about the ship journey, the exotic ports, the camaraderie among the men. He described the Mediterranean sunsets and joked about the army food. His mother had kept every single letter, reading them aloud to neighbors who gathered in her kitchen, hungry for news of their own boys overseas. But as the months passed, the tone began to change. What Mrs. Thompson didn't know was that Billy had been writing 2 sets of letters. The ones he sent home, carefully censored and optimistic, and the ones he never intended anyone to see. The letter that arrived that December morning was from the second set. By July 1915, Billy's letters home had become shorter, more careful. He still asked about the farm, still sent his love to Mary Sullivan, the girl he'd promised to marry when he returned. But between the lines, those who knew him well could sense something changing. "The heat here is something fierce, Mum," he'd written in August. "But the boys are in good spirits and we're doing important work. Don't you worry about your Billy. I'm tougher than old leather, just like Dad always said." What he didn't tell her was that by August, half his unit had been killed or wounded. He didn't mention that Charlie Morrison had been evacuated with dysentery and might never return. He certainly didn't describe the constant sound of sniper fire, or the way the smell of death hung over the trenches like a fog that never lifted. The last letter she'd received before the telegram had been dated November 15th, just 2 weeks before his death. It was brief, almost formal. "Dear Mother, I hope this finds you well. The weather is turning cooler now, which is a relief. Please give my regards to Mary and tell her I think of her every day. Your loving son, Billy." She'd read it dozens of times, searching for hidden meaning, for some sign of what was to come. But there was nothing, just the careful words of a son trying to protect his mother from the truth. But the letter that arrived 3 weeks after his death, that letter told a completely different story. Mrs. Thompson sat in her kitchen that December morning, the stained envelope in her hands, and tried to prepare herself for whatever was inside. The return address was unfamiliar, not Billy's handwriting, but someone else's careful script. A note was attached to the front. "Mrs. Thompson, this letter was found in your son's personal effects. He had written it but never sent it. We thought you should have it. Captain James Mitchell, 3rd Battalion." Her heart pounded as she carefully opened the envelope. Inside was Billy's familiar handwriting, but the words were unlike anything he'd ever written before. "My dearest mother," it began. "If you're reading this, then I'm probably dead, and someone braver than me has decided you deserve to know the truth." What came next would reveal not just the horror of what Billy had experienced, but a secret about his final days that would change everything his family thought they knew about his death. "I've been lying to you, Mum. Not about loving you, not about missing home, but about everything else. This place, Gallipoli. It's not the adventure I thought it would be. It's hell on earth, and I don't know if any of us are going to make it home." Mrs. Thompson's hands shook as she continued reading. Billy described the reality of trench warfare, the rats, the disease, the constant fear. He wrote about watching friends die, about the impossible orders they were given, about the Turkish soldiers who were just boys like him fighting for their own homes. But then the letter took an unexpected turn. "There's something else I need to tell you, something I've never told anyone. Do you remember Charlie Morrison, my best mate who I said got sick and was evacuated? That's not what really happened, Mum. The truth about Charlie Morrison would reveal a side of Billy that his mother never knew existed, and explain why his final days at Gallipoli were spent not just fighting the enemy, but fighting with his own conscience. Charlie didn't get sick, Mum. Charlie got scared, really scared. And I don't blame him for it, because I was scared too. But when the order came for the big push at Lone Pine, Charlie couldn't do it. He broke down completely, started crying, saying he couldn't kill any more people, couldn't watch any more of his mates die." Billy's letter went on to describe what happened next. In the chaos before the battle, Charlie had tried to desert, not to run away to safety, but to walk into no man's land unarmed, hoping the Turkish soldiers would capture him rather than kill him. "I couldn't let him do it, Mum. I couldn't let my best mate throw his life away like that. So I did something I'm not proud of. I knocked him unconscious and told the officers he'd been hit by shrapnel. They evacuated him to the hospital ship, and as far as I know, he's alive somewhere, probably back in Australia by now." Mrs. Thompson set the letter down, her mind reeling. Charlie Morrison had returned to Melbourne just 2 months ago. She'd seen him at the market, looking thin and haunted, but alive. He'd told everyone he'd been wounded and couldn't remember much about the battle. Now she understood why. But Billy's letter wasn't finished. The most shocking revelation was yet to come. The thing is, Mum, saving Charlie's life might have cost me mine. You see, Charlie was supposed to be my partner in the assault. We were supposed to watch each other's backs. But because I sent him away, I went into that battle alone. Billy described his final battle in detail, not the sanitized version that would appear in official reports, but the raw, terrifying reality of hand-to-hand combat in the trenches of Lone Pine. He wrote about the Turkish soldier who had cornered him, a boy who couldn't have been older than 19. I had my rifle pointed at him, Mum, and he had his pointed at me. We stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. And you know what I saw in his eyes? The same fear I felt, the same desperate wish to go home to his mother. What happened next would define not just how Billy died, but who he truly was in his final moments. I couldn't do it, Mum. I couldn't pull the trigger. Not because I was a coward, but because I finally understood what this war really was. It wasn't about heroes and villains, it was about boys like me and boys like him. All of us just trying to survive something that should never have happened. Billy wrote that he had lowered his rifle first. The Turkish soldier, surprised by this gesture, had hesitated. For a moment, Billy thought they might both walk away. But then another Australian soldier had appeared, and seeing Billy apparently surrendering, had shot the Turkish boy. In that moment, Mum, I realized I wasn't fighting for Australia anymore. I wasn't even fighting for you or Mary or the farm. I was fighting because I was trapped in a machine that turns good men into killers, and the only way to stop it was to refuse to be part of it anymore. But Billy's act of conscience would have consequences he never could have imagined. The letter revealed that Billy had been killed not by enemy fire, but by a sniper's bullet while he was trying to help wounded Turkish soldiers in no man's land. He had been carrying water to enemy wounded when he was shot, an act that would have been considered treason by some, heroism by others. I know this might be hard to understand, Mum. I know you raised me to be loyal to my country, but I've learned something here that I wish I'd known before I enlisted. Real loyalty isn't about following orders blindly. It's about staying true to the values you taught me. Compassion, fairness, treating others the way you'd want to be treated. Mrs. Thompson wiped tears from her eyes as she read her son's final words. If I don't make it home, I want you to know that I died trying to be the man you raised me to be. Not a soldier, not a hero, just a decent human being who refused to let war turn him into something he wasn't. Please tell Mary I love her and that if she finds someone else, she has my blessing. Tell Charlie that I don't regret what I did and that he should never feel guilty about surviving when I didn't. But the letter had one final revelation that would change everything Mrs. Thompson thought she knew about her son's legacy. There's one more thing, Mum. In my kit, you'll find a small wooden cross that I carved. It's not for me. It's for the Turkish boy I couldn't save. His name was Mehmet, and he showed me a picture of his mother before he died. She looked just like you, Mum. Worried and proud and heartbroken all at the same time. Billy had asked that the cross be sent to Mehmet's family in Turkey, along with a letter he'd written in broken Turkish, apologizing for the war and expressing his hope that someday mothers like his own and Mehmet's would never again have to send their sons to die in foreign lands. I know this might sound crazy, Mum, but I think that's what this war has taught me. We're all just people trying to protect the ones we love. The only difference between me and Mehmet was which side of the line we were born on. Mrs. Thompson finished reading the letter as the sun was setting outside her kitchen window. She sat in the growing darkness holding her son's final words and tried to process everything she'd learned. Her Billy hadn't died as a traditional war hero. He died as something perhaps more important, as a young man who had refused to let war destroy his humanity. He'd saved his best friend's life, tried to help his enemies, and died believing that compassion was more important than conquest. But the story doesn't end there. What Mrs. Thompson did with that letter would create a legacy that Billy never could have imagined. 3 days later, Mrs. Thompson did something that shocked her entire community. She published Billy's letter in the local newspaper, along with her own statement supporting his actions. She also began corresponding with other mothers who had lost sons at Gallipoli, not just Australian mothers, but Turkish mothers as well. The wooden cross that Billy had carved was eventually delivered to Mehmet's family in Istanbul, beginning a correspondence between two grieving mothers that would last for decades. Mrs. Thompson and Mehmet's mother, Fatma, would exchange letters, photos, and eventually visits, proving that Billy's final wish, that mothers would no longer have to send their sons to die, was not just a dream, but a possibility. Charlie Morrison, when he learned the truth about how Billy had saved his life, dedicated the rest of his own life to peace activism. He never married, never had children of his own, but he spent 60 years telling Billy's story to anyone who would listen. Mary Sullivan kept Billy's engagement ring for the rest of her life, but she did eventually marry and have children. She named her first son William, and every year on ANZAC Day she would tell him the story of the man he was named after. Not the sanitized version of a war hero, but the true story of a young man who chose compassion over conflict, even when it cost him everything. The letter that arrived 3 weeks too late had revealed a truth that was more powerful than any official war record. Billy Thompson hadn't died as a soldier. He died as a human being who refused to let war make him less than he was. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. In the midst of humanity's darkest moments, there are always those who choose to remain human. Billy Thompson was one of them, and his final letter home made sure that his choice would never be forgotten. Today, nearly 110 years later, Billy's letter is preserved in the Australian War Memorial, not as a testament to military glory, but as a reminder that even in war we have choices about who we become. And sometimes the most courageous choice of all is simply to remain kind.